As far as kids wanting to call me dad, or if that's too confusing for them, my attitude is usually just to let the child lead that. If a child wants to call you mom or dad, it's probably because at that moment they kind of need that, and I go with it. But it's something that, personally, I would never want to try to put on a child in any way. We've had children in our care who, never call me dad. We've had children who do it from day one. And we've had children where it's somewhere in between. In one situation, we had a child in our care who would never call me dad in the home setting, but in certain circumstances, picking him up from school, he would call me dad. And I think that was more of a social thing, and that he needed that and to not feel different in those moments. And that was totally fine with me. I just sort of went with whatever the child is comfortable with. And I think that's always sort of a safe way to operate. I don't know if anything will ever fully make you feel 100% ready to start fostering. But some of the things we did that I found really helpful are we started attending a foster parent support group before we'd actually accepted children, and just building out that community of support, prior to actually kind of needing to lean on it was really helpful. And it also just the experience and seeing other people go through, just having done the classes and kind of been prepared and licensed, but not having taken kids yet, to then having kids join their home and hearing about the ups and downs of that, gave me a much more realistic expectation of what it might be like. So that then when we finally did get our first call, you're nervous because I don't know if you'll ever be 100% ready, but it made me feel confident that we could take that leap, and try to bring these children into our home and help them and love them and care for them until they were ready to reunify with their parents. So I don't try to introduce myself as a father figure. If anything, I kind of try to do the opposite and make sure they know I'm not trying to replace their dad or be their dad, but instead, introduce myself as Chris. I'm gonna help take care of them and keep them safe and read them stories and play and do, sort of all sorts of fun things while they're living with us, and that I'm so excited to have them in our house. And that they can come to me with any, questions or worries or fears or really anything at all. And I think that when you approach it like that, then you're really giving the child the opportunity to kind of feel out what they want that relationship to be and what they need from you in that moment. So children definitely respond differently to me than to Lara. We're different people with different personalities. So some bond more quickly with me, some bond more quickly with Lara. And it's sort of, a learning process whenever you meet a new child. We had one child in our care who would not go to bed or do bedtime with Lara. He just wouldn't. So that ended up being that, I did bedtime every single night because that was what worked for the child at that point. And I think that as a caregiver, it's important to be flexible with that kind of thing to whatever extent, you can and are able, especially early on in the child living with you, because that's when they're sort of the most fearful and the most uncertain and need the most comforting. And so to whatever degree you can, sort of meeting them where they are and having that period of time really be on their terms, I think is super helpful. I definitely don't think I'm just the sidekick, or that I'm viewed that way by, the people who have worked with us in regards to a child's case. I hope not. I think that, the reason that I'm not viewed that way and I'm viewed as more of an equal partner is that Lara and I do all of the important stuff together to whatever extent we're able to. So typically we both go to court. We both go to any sort of family team meetings or anything like that and try to meet with all the various service providers and sort of people involved in the case together. Of course, we have to sort of do different things at different times depending on our schedule or just what the child's most comfortable with. If a child is more comfortable with me taking them to the dentist, then I take them to the dentist or to the doctor or whatever. And if they were more comfortable with Lara, it would be the same thing. We've also typically had siblings, so sometimes just as a matter of necessity, you have someone doing one thing with one child and someone doing a different thing with the other. But in general, I think as long as you show up and are invested, people will treat you equally. I don't know if I ever would have become a foster parent without Lara. To be honest, I didn't know much about sort of the foster care system or what being a foster parent or foster child was, really aside from pop culture and news and that sort of stuff. I think that I was always kind of vaguely aware, but didn't really know the intricacies of the system. But then, that's one of the great things about life is it can lead you down unexpected paths that are wonderful. So when I met Lara, it was something she was really interested in basically from the jump. And then the more I learned about it, the more interested I became. And ultimately, when we took the classes, that really gave me the confidence of, oh, this is something we can do. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, so I've always loved kids. And it was, really special to be able to see that we could play this important and special role in, one child or many children's lives. And that's been really wonderful and one of the best parts of my life. If there's a child that's only responding to one parent, so in this case, if someone was just responding to Lara and not really to me or letting me help with things, I think my strategy would be to just try lots of different things rather than trying to mimic what works for Lara. I would try to find, what is my way of doing it that sort of suits my relationship with the child. So maybe that's being really silly and playing lots of games. I mean, a great way with a kid who doesn't, necessarily want your help with their shoes or getting into the car or whatever it is. If you can make it a game, suddenly they forget that you're helping and it's more just you're playing a game with them. And that might be an entry point to where they start to trust you. And then they do let you help with more things that currently, your partner has to do more of because the child reacts when you help. So I think the key is just kind of taking your time and trying lots of different strategies. It's trial and error. And if there are any specialists, on the case, be it a caseworker or a therapist, they've probably got a lot of great ideas that you can try too, and just sort of add that as one more thing, to try. I've not been in a circumstance where we were, warned when we got a call that a child had a lot of intense male triggers. But I think that if we got a call like that, the key would be really talking through with the social worker who is calling that we have a small home and I am an active part of, the lives of any children in our care. So it's not as though we have lots of different independent spaces and there could be a child who had male triggers but sort of wouldn't have to be around me. Like I'm a pretty active part of the house. And that would be something to really consider. I think, in any case, when you get a call about, a potential child entering your home, the key is you gotta just look at that case as specifically as you can and see how that lines up with your family and what ultimately you can provide for that child, because that is really what's most important. Finding other foster dads to connect with is not always easy, but I think that it's really important. And one of the things I do is I just try to be sort of clear and upfront with people that being a foster parent is a big part of my life. It's something I'll bring up, in meetings for work or networking events, and the number of times that in someone telling me about their life, they've said, oh, me and my wife did classes to do that, or that's something I've thought about. You find that there are more connections sort of to the foster care world than you might know about, just because it's not something you've been talking about. But the more you do talk about it, the more you can find those connections and find other people that are kind of in that world who can lend support and just, become a friend that kind of has a sense of what you're going through. Because that is a really important part of the process, is knowing that there are people on your side that you can talk to who have some sense, of what the process is like and what you're going through.